Welcome to another episode of the Get Out Swim podcast. I'm your host, Seamus T. Quinn, and today I'm joined by coach and founder of RaceBetter. Today's guest is Ben Lee. Ben, thanks for hopping on.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And I also have to get used to saying I'm the host, and this is my co-host, swim coach Zhao Mescalote. So over on the other screen, we have, I pointed the wrong way. We have Zhao. So Zhao, say hello.
Hey, what's up, guys? Glad to be back.
Yeah, so great. So Ben's a friend of Zhao's, and I keep pointing the wrong way. I got to go this way. Anyways, I'm flipped around. Ben's a good friend of Zhao's, and they just did a clinic together at Georgia Tech with RaceBetter. And so I want to start there. Ben, why don't you tell us about how you and Zhao know each other and kind of what you two have been doing together over at Georgia Tech?
Yeah, I think we just kind of hit it off on like Instagram, right? But we actually met in person back in North Carolina over at NC State. Had a Brazilian connection, Breno Correa, and Breno was swimming with Zhao at Wolfpack Elite at the time, and I knew Breno through ISL because I had managed the LA Current for 3 seasons. And so Breno swam for us. And so I went up to go visit Breno and ended up connecting there, and just loved the energy that Zhao was bringing to the deck, loved the curiosity and the types of questions and the ways that he was engaging in swimmers. And so just kind of hit it off. Ended up at a great Korean barbecue restaurant after both of us were doing clinics in the area one weekend, and kind of the rest is history.
Nice. Zhao, what about from your perspective?
Yeah, I think it was funny because Breno ended up asking me one of the days. He was like, "Hey, can one of my friends just come in to watch practice?" And like, no background, right? Like I thought it was like a friend, like someone that maybe swam in the LA Current. I wasn't sure if it was like you know, a physiotherapist, a massage therapist. Like he didn't tell me coach. And Ben shows up and like just within 5 minutes, just dropping some knowledge and just like pointing out things. And I'm like, wow, this guy knows what's up, man. So it kind of like instigated me to just ask questions and just be curious about, hey, like, where do you come from? What's your background? Like, what do you do now? And I even told him, like, we got to go out to dinner after this. So I think we went out to dinner after practice and just kind of hit it off and stayed in touch. And, we always knew that we were going to be like doing projects together at some point. And finally the timing was good. And most recently, like this past week, we had an event at Georgia Tech, which was really cool. But I'm going to let Ben kind of like take over and explain a little more about, just give a little more of the background of what RaceBetter is. Obviously, like we did an event and it was a really cool clinic, but RaceBetter is a lot more than that. So we're going to let Ben explain what his vision is and what is RaceBetter.
Yeah, no, so RaceBetter's been this evolution. Probably it's come about over the last, a little bit longer than the last decade. I've always done some sort of private lessons, clinics, teaching. To me, I've had a couple other ventures outside of the swim world in conjunction with everything I was doing coaching wise. But I've always said that what I realized that the unifying pieces of everything I've done is that it marries the creative side of my brain and then the relational side of my brain. I love working with people. I love investing in people. And then I love things that challenge me to get outside my box, get outside of my comfort zone. And so RaceBetter came about as a way to spread knowledge to the rest of the swimming community and to start to bring them together in a way that unified parents, coaches, teams, and athletes. And I wanted to create a platform where folks could enter at various different points. It could be through a clinic or lab setting. It could be through an online or in-person strength program. But at the end of the day, I wanted to empower individuals to think creatively for themselves. So if you come into a lab, and you walk away, we want you to say, hey, not only do I know that I can do 15 underwaters, for example, I want to know why I'm doing 15 underwaters and maybe how to adjust that for a 50, or if I'm racing 100, if I'm racing a 200. If I come in and I do a strength program and train under RaceBetter, I want to be able to know how to produce force and move fast and move at speed and move with intention, but be able to connect that back to what I'm doing inside the pool. Because if you can lift heavy and fast, but you can't translate that from land to water, then it's kind of pointless, right? Because at the end of the day, we're performing in aquatics, we're performing horizontally instead of vertically. And so, yeah, that's kind of the big goal. And I think there's a lot of knowledge out there in the world, but it's very fragmented. And we just want to help people communicate better. We want to support coaches well with education, with mentorship. We want to support parents to help them better understand how to come alongside their athletes, how to come alongside their teams and the coaches that they're working with, and just unify the entire ecosystem.
What did you guys? All right, so give an example, like working at Georgia Tech with RaceBetter. You guys work together. What did that kind of clinic look like? What were you trying to discuss with the swimmers that were there? What were things that went well, like you guys could reflect on and be like, hey, we hit it there. This worked well. And so just give some examples.
I'm going to start off just by bragging on the kids that attended, because honestly, that's the biggest joy, I think, of coming into any of those environments, when you know that the work that you've done has made an impact, but it's so dependent on them choosing to engage in the process as well. And so, like, they really did a phenomenal job. The coaches that were there, the athletes that were there, and the parents that were there were so engaging with their questions, with the attention to detail, and just their involvement in the process. They took ownership of it. But what sets kind of our day apart was that we broke it into a classroom session, a dryland session, and then an in-water session. So in the classroom section, we led off with that to try to help them make the connection visually and kind of cerebrally to what we were going to do in the water later, so that they at least had a concept and a roadmap before we were headed. So we broke down some video of Ryan Lochte's underwaters, and we compared that and contrasted that to Tyler Clary, to Laszlo Che, and even Yoshike, who's a Japanese backstroker. And we looked at their body lines. We looked at how thoracic mobility and tightness could impact their ability to hold the line. And that allowed us to kind of then take a step back in the process and say, hey, so this is why when your coach asks you to work on mobility and stability and flexibility on land, or when your coach asks you to build strength and have attention to detail there, this is why it matters. Because if you have a tightness here, or you have the inability to hold a certain body posture under pressure, then when you now transfer that to the water, where there's now additional distractions, you can't visually see or feel yourself like you can on land, you're going to struggle more. So once we had that breakdown and the shapes that we were trying to get them to create, we were able to observe like how they rode their lines to the surface. We then set them up with a very push off and streamline and underwater specific dry land. So I look at dry land, or I look at warm ups really in three parts. There's a part where you try to get someone warm, just kind of get the general movement, get the body warm. There's a part where you try to activate the CNS connection, meaning how fast and how well your brain sends signals to your muscles to get them to do what they need to do. And then the third piece being how specific you can warm up to your task. So warming up specific for swim, or warming up even more specifically for underwaters. So what that looked like for us that day was we did a lot of skipping, A skips, B skips, general skips with like arm circles, bear hugs to get the body blood flow going. And then get a little bit of that like foot to ground, core connection, getting that core bracing engagement going. And then from there, we did some 2-inch runs, some neuromuscular stim where they had to move really, really quick feet, but with very slow arms. So, just try to challenge them to do multiple things and have multiple things flowing at the same time to see if they can still stay relaxed. Because it's hard. It's hard to almost like tap dance very fast. That's kind of what you picture like a 2-inch run to be. You're swinging your arms very slowly, trying to stay loose in the shoulders. but then your feet are just like touching hot lava rocks, you know, and you're trying to just get as many ground contacts as possible. And so from there, we then transitioned into more of a vertical jump based movement, drops from those pogos into a streamlined squat jump to test to see if they can hold that streamline under duress. You know, anybody can hold a streamline well statically. And if you can't, like, you know, it's pretty easy to fix. But then when you add the component of having to control the power that's coming through that triple extension, you know, going from the ground contact to your ankles, knees, hips, and then all the way extending into that streamline, that requires a whole different level of play. So we took about 35 minutes getting them warm on land, so that by the time we got into the water, we didn't have to wear them out in the water with a warm up and sacrifice their form. We were able to see what we needed to see with a new group of kids in probably less than a 200, right, Joe? I think I think we did like 825, just getting them to swim a little bit, getting them to kick a little bit on their back so we could kind of see how that body line translated. And then from there, we just dove right into it, you know, started to do some glide drills, and then eventually the progression. Dow really, you know, led that and did a masterful job with that, getting them to come into a ball, open back up, push and glide competitions that balance a little bit of fun to keep them engaged, and then also that control piece of how to like uncurl your body.
One of the coolest things that, and I told Ben, and I'll keep bragging about this, I think it was involving the parents and having that parent education session. Part of the clinic was I stayed in the water with the kids, and at the same time, Ben had a parent education session in the classroom, which not many people are doing, right? Not many companies, not many clubs even are paying attention to, you know, what is it like to be on the other side. And I feel like, you know, it was really cool to be a part of that. But I wanted you, Ben, to kind of explain a little more on RaceBetter's point of view. Like, is that what you're trying to create? Like I don't want to say a one-stop shop, but like a company and a community where, yes, we do have swim clinics, we do have strength and conditioning, we do have video analysis online, we do have parent education resources. Is that kind of like the goal behind RaceBetter?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's a great question, because to start with, I think one of the things that I love about what we're doing is that we're challenged every day, and we've kind of created this environment where we're challenged every day to really live out what we preach. You know, when I go to bed at the end of the night and I look in the mirrors and brush my teeth, or I put my head down my pillow, I want to know that I lived with integrity and the honesty of like everything that I expected and asked of our athletes, right? And so living that out means that I have to live out in the rest of my life. Like, I'm a big believer that how you do anything is how you do everything. And you know, with Joe at the clinic, we kicked off everything together, but then being able to empower him and let him just take over that swim portion after we got the swimmer started, so I could step away and do that parent meeting, is a very active way to show him, hey, I trust you. I have full confidence in you and our alignment for you to deliver a great product. And I see your passion coming through, and I want to come alongside and nurture you. One of the big things that I believe about mentor-mentee relationships is that it's not a one-way street, you know, and even these clinics, like we're going in and we're expected to deliver knowledge. But honestly, I always walk away feeling like we got more out of it as clinicians and coaches than maybe we gave, because even though the general knowledge is there, every time you go to a clinic, there's always some percentage of the kids and the families that are new, that are experiencing you for the first time on deck, whether it's your presence, your delivery, the drills, your, you know, even just how the way that you communicate it. And so you have to adapt what you're doing to basically extract the best possible version of that group. And even if you have some of the same kids, they've all been growing and experiencing life outside of the last time you guys had an interaction. And then now they're also coming together in a different capacity. So there's that sort of adjustment. So being able to go into that parent session, one of our big goals was to help them learn how to have better communication with their coaches and also with their athletes. We covered things like, what kind of conversations are we having in the car, post-practice, post-meet, and how does that impact the trajectory of your athlete? How does that impact the confidence of the coach of your athlete? Your athlete has, let's say they had the greatest swim of their life, they had a very mid swim, or they had the worst swim of their life. How does your line of questioning, or how does your engagement in the car then impact them? So, instead of maybe saying, man, that was a terrible race, like, what are you doing? What if the question became, let's say it's early October, like, what if, well, I know you're working really hard on technique with your coach this fall and working on those little details of your race strategy. What are 3 things that you're really proud of that you set out to accomplish? And do you feel like you hit those marks, rather than drawing or focusing the entire piece of the attention around a time or a scoreboard and a drop? Just kind of learning the different pieces of what to celebrate and when to celebrate versus what the non-negotiables are. And I'll leave it with this. I think this has stuck with me for years. A counselor once said to me that unexpressed expectations are the equivalent of premeditated resentment. And that took me about 3 weeks at the time to kind of completely unpack. And I brought it up in the parent meeting, but I think language and communication really matters. Like, as a coach, are you being clear to the parents on what support you need from them? As a coach, are you being clear to your athlete about what is expected of them and what kind of effort you want to do? Because, like, I look at things like when I ask an athlete, hey, how did you sleep last night? And usually, especially if you're dealing with teenagers, you're like, you're lucky if you get more in the grunt, but if you get more in that, usually it's just like, good, fine. But it doesn't really tell you what you're needing to know as a coach, right? So then the deeper question might be, hey, how many hours did you sleep last night? What time did you get to bed? And then, so because a lot of times they might say good, but to me, like, there's a scale from, hey, best sleep of my life and didn't sleep a wink last night. And if they say good, but then they also tell you 2 hours, immediately as a coach, if you're a responsible coach, you're like, crap, that means they're actually probably not going to be ready for anything I planned today, because their CNS is shot. They're physically probably shot. It doesn't mean that, surprising things can't happen and we are dependent on perfect conditions to execute. But, there is a reason that those metrics, especially sleep, matter. And then for the athlete, it's like, are you communicating well to your coach and your parent? Are you, 10 and under, we have this model where you have to be, well, we expect that it's very parent and coach directed and guided and supported, where you're just really introducing, young children to and exposing them to different things, different opportunities. It could be multi-sport athletes. It could be music. It could be, different forms of communication, relationship dynamics. But hopefully by the time they come through a program by 15 to 18, they're taking more ownership, and it's very athlete directed in this kind of evolving spectrum, and it's coach guided and then parent supported.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because we talked about this off air, and it seems, one of the most important aspects to consider of coaching, educating, is your communication. And because it doesn't matter how much you know, you need to be able to communicate that effectively to your athletes, to parents, to everyone involved in your organization. And that's typically when teams, businesses do well, is when communication is in alignment, people are on the same page. And so that's interesting to think about, because it's one thing to say, hey, how are you doing today? Oh, I'm good. And then it's another thing to say, go a little deeper and say, hey, what's one thing that, that went well for you today? Or what's one thing that bothered you? Just specifying what it is. So I think that's a good reminder for people in general.
I wanted to just add one little thing. I'm sorry, Ben, I'm gonna extract this from you because I know it already, but how does being a dad and having 2 boys that are in sports, grew up in sports, kind of helped shaping that coaching, that part of your coaching and now, like, using that as kind of like examples in a classroom for other parents.
Yeah, I guess this is like a public apology to my boys because I've certainly made a ton of mistakes along the way. I have done a lot of good, right, too. But I think, a lot of this, a lot of where I'm at today, I'm very grateful for because I've been shaped by those experiences. I've had success as a parent, but then I've definitely had moments where I fell on my face and had some case to. One of the stories that I often go back to is Aiden, my youngest, who's now playing lacrosse at Lenore Rhine, I think he was like 8 or 9 years old, and he was qualified for 7 out of 8 events at that point for the state meet. So he's chasing that elusive last cut, and it was the 50 fly, and I happened to get to the pool a little earlier to go work with some other athletes. So I was like, hey, let me pop over. I'm sure he'll be glad to see me standing by the flags to watch this race. And he absolutely bombs this performance. Like, I think it was like a 2 or 3 second ad. And so I'm at the Aquatic Center in Charlotte, and in spite of all my, experience as an athlete, in spite of my experience as a coach at various levels, I remember the thought that crossed my brain was, oh my goodness, every single parent in the stands behind me is going to think I'm a fraud. Here I am, I'm supposed to be this coach that's had, experience at the highest levels of the sport. I've put people on Olympic podiums. I've done, just all these numbers of things that look great on paper, and I can't even get my own son to swim and perform at a certain level. And the coolest part I think about the story is Aiden popped up and he sees me, he spots me standing there, and I get this like ear to ear grin, double thumbs up from him. And in that moment, like, I don't know if he saw his time, to be honest. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. But like in that moment, I had a real hard gut check, and I was like, wow, this is what this is really all about. Like, dude, he's 8. And even if he wasn't 8, but it's like, this is what he's about. He's in the process. He's in the arena, as that Roosevelt quote goes. He's a man in the arena. He's trying. He's risking failure. He's putting himself out there and giving it his all. And what more can you ask for, in that moment? And I think a lot of what, my conversations now with folks stems from that learning that if I, even with all the experience, the book knowledge, the experiential knowledge that I have, and the athletic knowledge, could make that mistake, I really feel for parents and who may not have walked that path before. And so it's become this really empowering mission for me just to like be able to open up some of those dialogues and create a platform where people can have those conversations. And my boys continue to both shape me. Aiden sat me down before and had conversations about things that I do well in tournaments that settle him, and times where I maybe talk too much. And he's been able to share the kind of pressure, from inside the athlete's mind of, hey, I'm already feeling pressure to perform well for my coach, to remember all the things that we are working on that he asked of me at game time. I'm taking a step back because my friend and teammate's having a really rough day, and I'm trying to help carry this load for him. And, like, when I first heard that over dinner one night in New York with him in the middle of it, or at the end of a tournament, it kind of broke my heart because I realized how quickly and how easily it is to forget as an adult our middle school selves, our high school selves. Like, we have to really be able to take a step back and step into their shoes and meet them with empathy at their level. Not like a lack of accountability sort of way, but just to recognize that, like, put on their shoes for a day and walk through, the situation with them.
Interesting. And so talk to me about your kind of, I guess, own experience as a coach. I'm curious, like, what are some things that you continue to learn through your coaching journey? Like, what's something maybe early on that has been dispelled that you maybe initially thought, or what are some aspects of your coaching that have really grown, over time?
I'm chuckling at the question because, I think there's this assumption that if you get older, with every year you age, you're supposed to also be wiser. And then maybe that's true, but like, I think there's a part of me that feels like every year it goes by in coaching, the less I know. And what I mean by that is, I think we've all had these sort of like moments where we have these aha moments where we think like, wow, like I'm the best thing that's ever happened to the sport. I finally understand this. I can go share this, you know, with everybody else, and this will fix all of the problems. And it could be coaching, it could be in life. And then nowadays, I think when I learn something, it almost opens up more questions than answers. And I think it's a good thing, because I've always said that if I get to a point where I feel like I've arrived, it's probably also the same day that I should hang up my coaching hat. I think coaching is about relationships. I think I really give a lot of credit to one of my early mentors, Dave Marsh. I spent almost a decade together with him between our time at SwimMac and then later on at Team Elite and then at LA Current and ISL. He had a way of knowing how to look at an athlete and be able to look them in the eyes and just kind of gauge what that body language side of how they were really doing that day. And a story that an experience, really, not a story, an experience that I remember from, gosh, I think it was like 2018 or 2019. We were out in San Diego, and Michael Chadwick came in on a Friday morning with everybody else, and we were about 10 days out from a major competition. And it was like 6 a.m. Friday morning practice, and Marsh writes 3 practices on the board. He had this gigantic whiteboard, and first practice was so easy that, you know, if you were trying to rest someone, you kind of wondered, like, well, why not just let them stay home and stay in bed that day versus dragging to the pool. And the next set was kind of what you would expect about that time of year for a sprint mid-D group of our caliber. And then the last set was so hard that, gosh, I don't know that I would give that to the best open water swimmer that I know. I just remember seeing that set and being mortified, you know, heart sinking, all that. And he gave a little talk and he said, Ben, I want you to hand out some whiteboard markers, and guys, I want you to take a marker and write your name next to the set that you feel like you need to do today. And I think it was like Katie Miley and Andy Muris, Chatty, obviously, and then a few other people from the Chinese team, the Israel team, who were training with us at the time. And everybody put their names next to, you know, a set. And Chatty put his name next to the third set. And I remember thinking, man, like, he just popped off a really great 50 for the push yesterday. Like, what are we doing here? We're going to bury him with this set if he goes through even a fraction of it. But I've been with Marsh long enough to know there was probably a reasoning to the madness. And so I let it slide, rolled with it. And then the minute Chatty dove in, I looked at him and said, what was that all about? And he said to me, he doesn't think he has the confidence. He doesn't believe that he's done the work that he needs to do to be successful in the next 10 days. And that was it. And so I ended up on the other end of the pool, pulling a stretch cord for Andy. And I remember I was kind of out of the corner of my eye, keeping just a loose eye on Chatty. And he pops up at the flag, swimming like an otter like this, about maybe 1,500, $2,000 into this set. And he looks at me and he goes, Ben, I think I'm Gucci. You care if I peace out? And I just kind of chuckled, went like this and go, get out of here. Have a great weekend. But, you know, in those like unspoken moments of teaching, I'm forever grateful to Marsh, because he created this environment where for someone curious like me, like, I started asking a million questions in my mind, like, wow, or even just making observations. Like, I knew a certain kind of key anchor points, like Chatty had come through the SwimMac program. He was probably kind of a senior 3-level swimmer in high school, and then had really blossomed at Mizzou and then gone on to obviously turn pro. But in that process, it was like how much trust had been built over the years to the point where Mark knew that, had the confidence in him that Chatty would speak up and advocate for himself when he was ready. And how much trust in reverse did Chatty have that Marsh would write a set or present him with an option or a series of options that would screw him over in his preparation. And, you know, what did I need to do in those processes, like in my own career, to build that kind of relationship? And, you know, what kind of conversations did I need to be having off-site? What kind of knowledge did I need to be developing? as a coach, like, yeah, you got to get the sets right. But if I've learned anything over the years, like, that's the easy part. I mean, I think, the baseline, you've got to be able to coach technically. You've got to be able to get the metabolics right and get the timing right during the part of the season. But we're really more about relationship coaching and the soft side of coaching rather than the technical piece.
Interesting. Yeah. And now a quick word from our sponsor, Aquatic Sports Performance. If you're serious about getting stronger, faster, and increasing your mobility, ASP has you covered. They specialize in strength, mobility, and dryland programs built specifically for swimmers and aquatic athletes. Everything is delivered right through the Train Heroic app, so you can follow along easily and track your progress. I've personally been using their online strength and mobility program, and let me tell you, it's made a real difference in how I feel in the gym and how I move in the pool. It's structured, effective, and tailored to what aquatic athletes need most. So if you want to train smarter and build real strength that transfers to your swimming, check out Aquatic Sports Performance and their Train Heroic programs. You'll find links in the show notes. This segment of the podcast is brought to you by SwimSmart. SwimSmart is an incredible company that has a plethora of tools, including designs like the push paddle, the power harness, the squeeze line, and an informative book like The Biology of Swimming. If you're interested in learning how to level up your swimming, go to swimsmarttoday.com to find the best tools for you. Use code GETOUTSWIM for a discount on your purchase. Thanks again, SwimSmart. How would you describe your coaching approach, your style, based off of that, with kind of putting relationships first? Like, how are you working with your athletes? How are you getting to your athletes? What is that like?
I think it really depends on the kind of season. I think there's times where I'm very exacting. Very specific, going back to that communication piece and how language matters. I'm very clear on what I want and clear when I want them to go slow and be patient. But at the same time, I recognize that we got to put it together for a race, right? You can swim the most beautiful stroke, and if you do it slowly, you're not going to win any medals and get any podiums. So I try to ask a lot of questions. If you were to step alongside me and shadow me on a pool deck for a day, you'd probably hear a lot of like, what did that feel like to you? Describe that to me. Or you might actually get a lot of silence from me. I'm not a big screamer on deck. Like, even when I'm in the stands, parents laugh at me because they're like, yeah, your kids are in water, your athletes are in the water. Like, why aren't you yelling? And I'm like, well, no, one, they can't hear me. Like, all they get in the water. I mean, we're all swimmers in this room. Like, you just hear, wah. Get that. Yeah. You're lucky if you get that. So unless you had a very specific part of your plan where you needed to look over for something, you're probably not hearing me. But I've learned that every athlete needs something different, and I try to meet them individually where they're at. For one swimmer, it might look like dancing with them and being silly and doing this little like dance before they head up to the blocks, because they need that to mentally relax, and they already know the rest and they can execute, and it frees them up. For another, it might be just a very short reminder of one or two things that we're targeting to focus on. I think of like Felix Jedbrat from Sweden last year at 810s. Felix is super strong at underwaters and kicking out 15s and sub 5. And so we knew that he was struggling in prelims because he couldn't tell where the 15 mark was. On the way out on the odd 25, there was a line at the bottom marking the 15, but on the way back there wasn't anything, and so he was actually popping up early in prelims to make sure he didn't overkick and get DQ'd. But we spotted a conference logo that was kind of emblazoned to the bottom of the pool, and we were able to kind of figure that out and say, hey, maybe we can use this as a benchmark and add one kick or two kicks, and that became part of our strategy. But I knew that in that process, Felix is a thinker. And this comes back to like knowing your athletes too, right? Back to that trust equation. So Felix the thinking part is great when we're in season and we're training, because he always hungers to get better. But it's also his Achilles heel, because if you tell him something at the wrong time and he can't unhear that, Now he's grinding on trying to make that right. And the last thing any coach needs an athlete to do is to be thinking and have their brain on instead of just racing in competition. So I had to kind of choose to not give him 15 things to think about. It was, hey, surgically, here's 2 things, roll with that. So I think that definitely shapes my coaching. And then the silence piece is, I touched on that earlier, is a big part of the coaching, because I think it's okay to let an athlete be disappointed, to experience that feeling. It's okay to let them be a little angry, a little frustrated. I think those that find success at the highest levels are able to manage that emotional bandwidth well. They don't let the highs get too high. They don't let the lows get too low. You might have the best one of your life, but you still have to be able to come back down and reset and go, hey, what's next? What do I need for this next race? What does my teammate or team need for their next performance, and how can I sew back into that environment? Same thing, like you might get really low because you've done the worst or very mid race of your life. You have to be able, we joke with younger kids. Isabel Staden at a recent clinic told the young ladies, like, hey, it's okay, go croggle for a 200, go cry in your goggle. I think we've probably all done that, and expressed our frustration in some way. But then the most important part of what you said is, then you need to take a step back and then reset and go, hey, what can I learn from this? And then how do I move past this? And maybe it's not a full dissection, in the moment at that meet, if you've got a 2, 3 day, 4 day meet, but it's this ability to kind of push pause, set it aside, and keep moving forward. So in practices, you'll hear a lot of silence from me too, And then the last piece is probably, I think my athletes, if you were to ask them, would say that there is they know when I want something, it's important to me, because for the same reason that I'm very quiet at times, I can bring the energy. If we're doing, assisted speed and I'm pulling the cord, we probably got music blasted in the background, right? Guys are getting hyped. The women are laughing with each other. We're pulling the cords. We're high-fiving. We're, creating that energy. We've all stepped into a room where either you feel that energy gets sucked out of a room, or you feel when someone walks in and the mood kind of like elevates. So I think we have a lot of power and influence over that. So when they see me stable for the majority of the time, and then when I come across demanding, or I come across excitable, or my voice and the inflection and the tone and the volume amplifies, then they also can recognize the difference and go, hey, we're ready to rise up and match this.
Totally. Yeah.
Ben, can you give us real quick before we move forward, a little kind of like timeline of your coaching, like from being a club swimmer into like where you're at now? Because I know you have that little stunt in business in the middle, and I think that's very interesting. And I'm probably going to tie into another question about the business part of RaceBetter as well. But yeah, just like a quick.
I started swimming at like 2 years old. We kind of just got thrown or dragged into the water, but not in like a bad way. My mom, what ended up becoming a really neat piece of my story, actually started kind of from tragedy and trauma, because my mom had cancer, breast cancer, for a number of years, like long before I was born. She and my dad got married, 26, young, excited about life, and then boom, finds out that she has this cancer diagnosis and was actually told she couldn't have kids. And then my brother and I somehow were born and healthy, which was great. But the doctors really thought, hey, if you can do this sort of low impact thing in the water, this will help you extend some longevity, get you some movement, be really good for your mental side. And obviously, like, I didn't find all this out until later, but I started going to the pool really young with them. And I think my parents did a phenomenal job just making life fun. One of my fondest memories growing up was my dad would, dive and try to swim between his legs and play games underwater. And to this day, he won't admit to this, and I don't know if it's coincidence or it was planted, but one of the most poignant memories and why I loved going back to the pool as a kid was that I would always walk out of the pool with some money in my pocket. And I don't know if it was just like people forgot to empty their pockets and I would just happen to find a $20 bill or some coins, but I would always find something. And so I grew up like a little fish in the water, ended up on a team around 6 years old. in the DMV area. So started swimming for RMSC and then eventually went on to swim in college and then continued on my way into coaching. But as a coach, I coached collegiately, I coached club, and then coached on a pro side with Team Elite and then with LA Current. And as Zhao mentioned, yeah, I mean, I had a couple business stints kind of in between. I made and lost my first million actually before I was 21. I
Wow.
started this, I call it like basically like an Airbnb for boat and jet ski rentals business in my early 20s. And basically I really wanted to buy a crotch rocket and decided that probably wasn't a good idea if I wanted to live a long, full life, because I knew myself and knew that I loved to go fast. And so I ended up buying a jet ski thinking that landing on water 70 miles an hour would hurt less than landing on the pavement. And man, I could not have been more wrong. Like, let's put it this way, like landing on a glassy lake surface, which is about the only time you can hit 70 plus miles an hour, hurts just as bad, if not worse, because you actually bounce and skip along the water. But in that process, I was out on the lake on a Tuesday morning and just kind of noticing that there were all these houses in this lake community that had boats and jet skis just sitting on lifts, completely unused. And it got me thinking, like, man, if I could rent out my own ski and get it paid for, that would be awesome. But then if I could expand that and help all these people make money, maybe there's a way to grow a business without renting and or purchasing my own equipment and taking on a lot of capital risk. And so, yeah, I started a website, a business to start doing that. Eventually had some marina partnerships, bought a bunch of domains across the country and had a good amount of success with that, and spun that in my exit into a ride sharing company that actually competed with Uber and Lyft. So we were backed by Miller Coors, had some private investment as well, and scaled it. But through a tough kind of personal situation with the divorce and being a single parent, I ended up actually exiting the company early and having kind of to restart portions of my life. But I never stopped carrying all the lessons and the experiences of that time into what I did in coaching. And so, you know, I think it really afforded me this unique perspective to see a business side of how to make something successful. But also a side to make sure that we're reaching the humans that are, you know, that we care about the most, because I think especially now, I think a lot about legacy and, you know, money does make the world go round in the sense that we need it as a commodity, as a tool for us, but I want to be able to pass on that knowledge. And I think talent can cross borders, right? Talent can transcend borders, but you sometimes can't help the circumstances that you're born into or the environment that you're born into. And so if we can be a company and be an organization and a group of people that provide that knowledge to help people break through some barriers and I'll give them that opportunity to do something that their family hasn't been able to do thus far, then we can really make a bigger difference in the world. And that's what I'm really passionate about what we do.
Very cool.
That's awesome. How did you end up going? So I know you were at Team Elite and then ended up linked with the ISL. How was that transition like? Did you have to drop the teams that you were coaching to become the manager at LA Current? How did that go about?
Dude, I still do this now. Everybody sees what I put on Instagram, but I think most people know that social media is a very curated version of one's life. But yeah, I burn the candle at both ends and the middle. I guess I don't know if that's good or bad, but I don't know how to live any other way. In Davidson, North Carolina, which is where I lived for a better part of a decade, I frequented the same coffee shop, Summit Coffee. Shout out Summit Coffee, by the way, because they kept me functioning for so long. But that's where Marsh and I started kind of our initial conversations. We knew each other from some other, meets and had crossed paths before, but it wasn't until I started coaching a summer league team on a volunteer basis with his wife and his business partner attorney for Team Elite that he started taking some notice, and in typical Marsh fashion, he was like, "Hey, how do we get the right people on the bus, and then how do we then help them find the right seat on the bus?" And so we just want to head down the road, see where we're going, and then kind of pivot and adjust from there. So he kind of pulled me into into SwimMac, and started in that journey with him. And then for LA Current, I got a call. I was sitting on the carpool line one day waiting on my kids, and I looked down, and it's like, or I saw this unknown number from LA, and I pick up, and it's Lenny Krazelberg on the other line, which absolutely blew my mind. I had to kind of like pinch myself, and it's a very full circle moment because anybody who's a swim nerd and knows how impactful Lenny was to the swim community. As a leader, as an athlete, now as a business owner. And so Lenny called and said, "Hey, I'm putting together this team, and I'm really looking for a right-hand person to help me manage it, run it. This is the vision for it. This is going to season 1." And Marsh gave me a call and said, "You're the guy, and would love to kind of chat more with you. Are you interested?" So it was really cool to go from someone that I really looked up to someone that I got to work with, and he's one of the most genuine guys that I know. Like I think you see a lot of athletes that sometimes they're not necessarily great people, and Lenny is just truly one of those, like, what you see is what you get, and shoots you straight. We've developed a friendship and a bond over the last several years, and I'm really fortunate to count him as one of my friends now, as well as guys that I do business with.
What were some of your favorite memories of being with the LA Current?
I don't know that I would have said it then, but definitely the second year, season 2, that COVID year. I actually just reshared something yesterday from our time in the Netherlands with Maxime Rooney. There's this,
I saw
Instagram has those things that pop up, and it's like, "Hey, memory from," and so Maxime Rooney, one of our athletes, was doing an autograph session in the Netherlands with some younger kids from the local clubs, but it was just seeing the fan base come out, seeing, even in the midst of those environments where we only had 90 minutes outside a day, the types of on the island in Budapest, like the types of relationships that we could form, lifelong bonds where you get to know people that you might not otherwise kind of maybe connect with or chat with, because you were forced to be kind of cocooned in this environment. We had this run group that started, Tom Rushton and I. Tom's a big sky running guy, ultra runner. Like, I remember one of the first things I noticed about Tom, because I love running, I love ultra running and ski mountaineering. But one of the first things I noticed about Tom was his calves were so massive that when he ran, they rubbed together. And it always cracked me up. And I'm like, man, what do I need to do to get calves like Tom Rushton? But we started running together on this little loop on this Margaret Island. And eventually a couple coaches came out, and it was coaches from all walks of life. Some were super fit, some were, maybe not quite where they wanted to be fitness-wise. But we committed to always going out for one lap together. And in that lap, we went out at a pace that everybody could handle, and we just had conversations. We just talked about life, anything under the sun. And then those that wanted to break away later and do a little bit more, we did. But we built this bond because we were just consistent. We did the things that we asked of our athletes, and then we opened up about life. So I think beyond all the competitions, that certainly stood out to me. Obviously, seeing a ton of world records broken, being around the best of the best. Man, what a masterclass. We were in basically a 3-year extended masterclass around the top coaches in the world, top athletes in the world, and being able to see their processes and sometimes have an impact in their processes. Forever life-changing. Definitely shaped a part of my career. But yeah, I mean, I never slowed down during that. I was flying actually back and forth from Alaska, North Carolina, and California at the time, because I was working with a couple athletes leading up to Tokyo, which we didn't know was going to get pushed back until 2021. So it was like I'd go and coach in the morning from like 5 to 11 a.m. and then I'd go ski in the Front Range of the Chugach, and do these like massive solo tours. And then I'd fly back to Europe, 3 weeks later for ISL, and then go back to North Carolina, see my boys, work with a couple athletes, private lessons, and but what a time. It taught me a lot about resilience and who I was as a person. Definitely a season that I treasure and I'm grateful for a lot.
Awesome. I wanted to ask you, I pulled up a quote. This kind of goes back to what you were saying earlier about just being on the business side. And obviously we're always looking to make money and support our family. And sometimes, I guess that can be taken to an extreme as per capitalism. But I read your, I think it was a blog post on your Substack, and I just wanted to pull this quote and kind of get your thoughts on it. So in this post, you said, athletes deserve fair pay and respect, but when competition becomes purely transactional, a business of betting, biology, and chemistry, we lose the soul of sport. True sport isn't self-worship. It's the pursuit of mastery in service of something greater. Teammates, legacy, and the beauty of honest struggle. So I just wanted you to expand on that.
Man, not pulling any punches this morning, huh? I wrote that in response, I think, to, the expression of my own processing about enhanced games, but deeper than enhanced. I think it was my struggle with what I felt like was wrestling with whether I was losing friendships and losing relationships with athletes and humans that I cared about tremendously. Andrei Govorov lived at my house for a few months, and we had planned several things with RaceBetter, but also just in his own development cycle. Shane and I have worked together since the ISL days in various capacities, and I'd gotten to know them as human beings. But I also knew some of the personal struggles, which I don't feel like necessarily is my story to tell. But this writing was kind of a outpouring of kind of my processing of like, what does sport mean beyond this? Because I think it's really easy sometimes when we look back in hindsight to then justify our actions. And I'll speak for myself. Like, it's easy to say, like, I'm going to do something because this makes sense for my family in this moment. But as a 40-year-old now. But I think, like, when I look back at why I started coaching, I didn't start it to make a buck. When I started swimming, I didn't start swimming so that I could be a millionaire or have financial security. I started swimming because I had people that I looked up to, like a Lenny. I had people that I admired, and I had people like parents that I wanted to make proud. I had teammates that I enjoyed showing up and cutting up with at practice, at summer league or at club practice, because it was shared grind. Like, we laughed together, we suffered together, we cried together, we succeeded together. Whenever I think it was called this is probably dating me a little bit, but there was like a swim series back at the Mecklenburg Aquatics Center, probably 10 years ago now. And I remember some of the college teams would bring their guys out to race. And one of the things I missed most post-swimming career that I felt like I've never quite gotten back, and maybe ISL brought a little bit of this back, but I would see the Michigan team. I can still picture it in my mind, in that back corner with the bleachers. And when the men's team would get up and they were hyping each other up, and it wasn't manufactured. They were just, you could tell, like, I guess the best phrase is like a band of brothers, and you could see that there was one for all for one. They had each other's back, and they were going to be in this together, highs, lows, and everything in between. That always sent chills through me, because it showed that there was something bigger than doing something for oneself. And sometimes I think now we can get very transactional. We're like, hey, I need money to go put my kids through college, through boarding school. I need money to support, a parent. I need this to have this opportunity. I've worked so hard for this long, so I deserve this kind of recognition. I deserve a break. I deserve that nice car. And not that those things are bad things in and of themselves, but I hope that those aren't the only things we're chasing. And I think when speaking from a position of leadership, I think that weighs on me a lot as a leader. And when I work with athletes, you know, at the pro level, I often say to them, like, I think we have this burden of leadership where what is the message that we're going to pass on to this next generation? You know, we can fix their technique in a weekend. You know, we can teach them how to make money, but like, are we building better people? Because money to me isn't the crux of the problem. Money simply amplifies what's already in your heart. You know, I said to Jal the other day as we were walking into Georgia Tech, I'm in a period of my life where I'm actually doing a lot of stuff behind the scenes. And I'll actually put it out there. What people don't know is I'm building this business on the front end, and the business is fine. The business is stable. But I'm also coaching the private lessons. I'm traveling multiple times a week for athletes and teams, and I'm writing programs and, you know, teaching online. But then I'm also door dashing on the side, so I don't have to pull money out of the company, so I can actually reinvest. And it's burning a lot of, you know, bandwidth in some ways, probably at a somewhat unsustainable pace. But I've never thought about life as in balance or imbalance. You know, I've been like, where do I want to go? How do I get there? And by doing that, I can live out a way that allows me to then let the company breathe and not pull money out of it to really funnel into that next generation. And that sets us up to then scholarship another kid who might not be able to have this opportunity to come to a clinic. That allows me to offer a scholarship to a kid who might want to take a consulting call with me and ask about college recruiting, but can't afford my room. And yeah, there's just some things I think money can't buy, and that's a very personal decision. I don't expect others to live that way, but I think it feels like the most true thing to how I want to operate my life.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's man,
It's beautiful.
money can bring out the best in people. It can bring out the worst in people, and like you said, ultimately it comes back to relationships. Like, it's always, I try to remind myself that now it's always about the people. It's never about the product. Like, the product is great, and a medium like swimming or technology or whatever can help bring people together and get people excited to pursue, you know, their passion and whatever it is. But it's always about the people. That's what you remember 10 years down the line. You don't remember the sets. You don't remember, like, you might remember them, but it's less important, I think. So thank you for sharing. I was
I mean, if I'm not generous now, right? If I'm not generous today with what I have, then I'm probably never going to be generous, whether I have a lot or whether I have a little. Because I think it's really easy to give an amount. Money's an easy topic, and you know, it's very visible, right? It's easy to give an amount that looks impressive to the world, but it's actually not sacrificial. You know, I could get, but I think a lot of times it's like someone would look at it like, well, he gave $10,000. That's better than a $1 donation, but the $1 donation may have more meaning because it required more of the individual who had very little and gave the dollar.
Yeah.
And I love what you said about, you know, it being generational and being about relationships, because that's, you know, when I look back at what athletes have come back and said to me 10 years down the road, it's not those sets, like you said, that bond them. I mean, maybe a little bit of trauma bonding. We say that kind of jokingly, but like when I hear kids come back, it's like, hey, coach, remember that, like, you know, that thing that happened in the cafeteria at the Navy camp? Remember, you know, how we got together in this way? Remember that? Like, it's always relationship. It's those stories are built around those relationships and those experiences together, those shared experiences.
Yeah.
It's the bus rides on LA Current. You know, it's the bus rides, those 45 minutes bus rides going to the pool from our hotel to Naples. It's walking past the homeless guy at the bus station, and the smells of the streets that we had to kind of navigate together in Italy that we remembered, and then those conversations that sparked out of it, sitting next to Jack Roach on a bus and hearing his war stories and how that shaped his coaching, and then but also the neat parts of how he restored a sailboat and then sailed down the coast. And you know, you learn about people, and people make the world go round.
Ben, what does swimming training smart mean to you?
I think it means training with intention, but I also think it means remembering that it's just swimming. You know, like Alex Honnold said it one time in talking about his free solo attempt at Yosemite, like, you guys realize that this is just kind of this like construct that I've made up, right? Like, there is a way that you can just kind of hike up and do a walk up the backside of Yosemite. Like, I didn't have to go climb this face, but it's being able to challenge myself in the process. And for me right now, it's still fun. And I think swimming is that way. You know, we race the clock, and yeah, it's great to set a world record, and you know, it's certainly more fun to have money than to not have money. It makes a lot of things easier. It's more fun to have a gold medal on a podium than to be third or miss an A final. But records are meant to be broken, you know, but the lessons that we take away from our time in the water that then shape us into life as we become parents, partners, friends, teammates, coaches, whatever profession we walk into, that's a piece of it. The intention piece, I think, is one piece that sets us up, and it makes we swim smart because we learn to listen to our bodies. We learn to communicate. When I can listen to my body, and this kind of ties back into this where we started, you know, kind of full circle at the clinic, and we hope people get away from it, is if you can swim smart and you can communicate honestly, then you fostered a relationship of trust with your coach and parent, and you're not this 4-year-old who cries wolf, because you can say, hey, this has really helped me, and I have a track record of being consistent, so you believe that it helps me. So when I tell you, man, I'm really worn down and beat up this day, we can now pivot together and make a natural progression and adjustment. You know, when I can move with intention, then I can punch that weight up with the speed that I need, with the power and the connection that I need, and control my body so that it serves a purpose to help me go back into the water and execute my streamlines, execute my dry back, execute, you know, charging forward or setting that catch. Yeah, so intention, and then swimming with that freedom and fun.
Great.
Awesome. Great. And I was going to ask, Joe, do you have anything to add?
No, I mean, Ben went into a lot of detail. I like how he shared some. I you know, try to like fish for a couple of the things that I knew, but he ended up sharing a little more, which is really cool. I think it leaves you. I don't know if you might have any questions, but leaves you up to the last classic question.
Yeah, for sure. All right. On that note, Ben, are you a fan of the Get Out Swim? And if so, do you have a favorite Get Out Swim story?
Huge fan of the Get Out Swim, but I think it depends on how you want to use it, just like anything else in coaching, right? I mean, I think a Get Out Swim is the same way that coaches confidence coach. I remember this is not a Get Out Swim story, but which I'll get to, but like, I remember the first time being around Marsh, and I had never had to time an athlete next to him. And I thought I was a pretty good coach, and I sat there and I came up with the time, and I'm like, damn, my watch was broken today, or like, what's wrong with his watch? Like, we are way off, and one of us is wrong, and one of us is really slow, or one of us is really fast. And come to find out, you know, he was either starting his watch late or stopping his watch early to do what's called confidence coaching. And then I come to learn that many other experienced coaches do this because they recognize the relationship side of what athletes need, right? And obviously the more you get into coaching, you realize you have to be able to use that selectively. Because I watched Tom Shields look at Jack in the middle of ISL during warm up one time. He just kind of chuckled. Jack called a time burn, and Tom goes, "Jack, you and I both like. I mean, I know I want a fast time to be in a good headspace, but damn, like, you and I, there's no way I went that time." Which is kind of funny because Tom's at a level, where he can vocalize that and not read too much into that one way or the other. But yeah, when I think of get out swims, I think of it the same way. You want to set someone up for success. You don't want it to be an excuse to just conveniently bail out of a tough set, but you can use the get out swim to unify a group. The whole group is kind of down. It gives them during a practice and the set's maybe not going well. Maybe this becomes a thing and a tool to bring everybody together into something, again, bigger than any individual performance, because now they're rallying behind one athlete. You're building this camaraderie that then serves you and buys you this runway far longer than that one swim or that one set. When I think of get out swims, I want it to be challenging, but also achievable, because at the end of the day, when you think about relationships, I think of a John Maxwell quote where he says, "People don't care how much you know until you know how much you care."
Yeah.
And when the athlete knows that you believe in them, sometimes that's all they need to be able to run through a brick wall for you. They know their teammates have their backs. That's the difference between, that 10th of a second, that 100th of a second that gets them across the finish line positioning wise, where your team needs, and that dual meet in the, in that super clutch situation on a relay. So a get out swim, I don't think it's like a specific example, but I remember a young man who's just having a really, really hard time in practice, and he was down himself. You could see the shoulders dropping. You could see the language that he was using, you hear it becoming very, very negative. And to the point where almost like even the teammates were kind of like, "Dude, what are you even doing here? Like, you're bringing us down, and like either be here or don't be here," But when he successfully executed that get out swim, like the roar that I can still hear that erupted from everybody around him, it showed that he had been brought back into the fold. And it turned into a lesson that we were able to then debrief later on, where they were able to see as a team how much they had influence and power and impact on each other. And then he was also able to see how a shift in that mindset, because he thought that there was an opportunity to have success, that belief. When we think of, if I told you had 2 years of hard work and you were guaranteed to break a world record, you probably do anything I asked of you for 2 years, because that guarantee somehow frees you up because there's a finite timeline on it. But when you don't know that, that mind can swirl and become your own worst enemy. And so when he had that sort of like moment of hope, his heart went from being crushed and dead to coming back to life, and his body just kind of naturally kicked into gear and did what he needed to do.
Incredible. Yeah. It's amazing how the mind shift can change when.
Oh, actually, no, I got a story. Sorry.
No, here we go.
I don't know that I call it a get out swim, but this is.
Here we go.
I hope there's no footage still floating around. I'm probably inviting myself to some dangerous stuff here, but 2018, leading up to Asian Games, this will be a good one. Friday afternoon, Marsh was gone with the UCSB team, and so I'd been running Team Elite practices, and it was mostly a bunch of folks from China there, and Zhang Yufei was one of the athletes there, and so I had written this set of 6'1" suited, best average on 8 minutes, and given them some specific targets to hit. And they were doing fine. They were making the targets, and out of nowhere, in typical Marsh fashion, he rolls on the deck, and I see him walking in, the wide brim California, San Diego hat, surf hat, and he comes over and he's doing this once over on the board, and he goes, "Give me the whiteboard marker." And of course, a million thoughts racing through the brain, but I'm kind of peeping over his shoulder, and I'm like, crap, did I either really mess this up according to the plan that we had, and he thinks I'm done here, or who knows? You never really knew, right? But he wasn't changing the set, and all I saw him writing was, if team hits targets, and because I had descending targets kind of plugged in, Ben plus David equal 100 swimmer's choice. And I'm like, oh my God, I hadn't really swam much consistently for probably about 10, 12 years at that point. Like, I would get in 4 or 5 mornings a week to go surf. So, I mean, it's not like I was out of shape. I was a great athlete at the time, but I wasn't in swim shape by any stretch.
Yeah.
And so, of course, swimmers are super fired up. Had a female IMer go at 210 or 212. I had a CP, we called her Fifi, went a 57 high, and it was like, crap, we got to get in and go and swim, and so I'm picturing, grab a suit, come in Saturday morning, and we'll do this at the end of practice, and David looks at me and goes, nope, this is one of those things you gotta honor right now. So
yeah,
beg, borrow, steal, go find yourself a cap, goggle, whatever you got to do. We're doing this right now, and we're in khaki shorts. Like, there's a picture somewhere of me from this period of time. I'm in like khaki shorts, got a belt on and everything. Couldn't find a suit, so we dive in, and I don't know how this happened, but by the end of our swim, somehow like 85 or 90% of the rest of Team Elite had heard about this in the 10 minutes that it took from the time practice ended to this went down. They had all made it to the pool deck. I have no clue how they managed to get to the pool that fast, but it did. And there was like shaky cam footage of someone running down the side of the pool going, "Come on, David, no cheating. You always said back end speed." and someone else going, "Yeah, Ben looks really good, but oh man, here's a 75 mark. Piano's about to drop. He's going to be in a world of hurt here." So, yeah, it was a fun time, I think, for the athletes, because they, obviously bonded over something. One, they saw that we were good for our word, which I think in any, swimmers of any age, knowing that your coach's word is gold, and that they'll live up to what they say they'll do is super clutch. But I think it just bonded us beyond, what any set could do, because it went back to that fun piece. We're in a sport where I had a conversation with PP one time, and she goes, "Yeah, I was kind of selected pretty young to be in swimming, but honestly, I kind of hate swimming, And she was saying this in Chinese. I speak Mandarin, so I did a lot of my coaching with them in Chinese, and I paused for a moment. I didn't know where she was going with it. And then as I was reflecting on it, I went back and had this conversation. I was like, Fifi, to be honest, swimming's kind of tough, right? Like, I mean, going out and watching a football game, a soccer, American, what we call soccer, like, that's probably more exhilarating. You got the fans, you got the chants, the ballads, all the interaction, right? Staring at a black line, it really comes down to, again, what kind of relationships you have, and the laughter and the things that bring you back to the pool and that shared struggle. But staring at a black line up and down a pool itself, whether it's $3 grand, $5 grand, $10 grand a day, like, that's tough. But it's about what you make of it. And so that felt very full circle. I don't know that I could have put all those words in that moment, but that's definitely what happened, now as I reflect back on it, probably 7-8 years removed.
Yeah, definitely.
But man, that 100 fly hurt.
That's I got such a great image of you in the khaki shorts, like, just struggling.
But David's the more impressive one. I mean, he was, I think, 60 that year, so he's he's sitting there doing this whole thing, but there was also a point where he's doing dolphin dives to the behind the pool, finding any way to sort of like hack the system, and he's probably gonna kill me for sharing that publicly. But no, I mean, kudos to him. Like, it's all those little moments that shaped me, even as a young coach. That wow, this mentor of mine, this guy that I respect, this guy who's been, I mean, his resume speaks for itself, right? The number of NCAA titles that he produced, number of, I think it was like at that point, 50 plus Olympic medalists from, all over the world. But it wasn't beneath him to meet the athletes where they were at, to meet his coaching staff where they were at, to meet me where I was at and challenge me in that moment. Hey, this is one of those things we do right now.
Now. Yeah.
And I don't agree with them on everything. And I think there's a beauty in that. I think that's what made us sharp. And I think, Jao, even in our conversations, you've challenged me a lot on some of my perspective. I learned from you. I did a dead bug, on land to teach that body connection, that core engagement. And you had that little ball drill where you uncurled. Sometimes it's not even about disagreement. It's just being around other people that you can learn from. And that's the beauty of it. Relationship. So yeah,
absolutely. Yeah. Ben, this has been great. I have one more question, and I just it just came up, is if you were to converse with a younger version of yourself, or even a younger coach who's looking to pursue coaching and sort of a next chapter of swimming, what would that conversation look like? What would be some things that you would say?
Stay curious. I would absolutely lead with that. I think that's one of the things I'm most proud of about how I've gone about my life and my career. I've just been willing to stay curious and have this hunger for knowledge. I think it's really important to be willing to admit what you don't know and be in this pursuit of that knowledge, be in this lifelong pursuit of that knowledge, but simultaneously be able to rest in the confidence that at some point you've done enough to be a great coach. These last couple of years, I was really fortunate to be able to work and spend a little bit of time remotely with Antonio Lupola, who's Sarah Sjöström's coach over in Sweden. And, I'm actually actively participating in a mentorship program that he's currently offering. And I'm diving into a little bit more of like metabolics and learning about some of Jan Olbrecht's work and some of the lactate testing and things of that nature, VLA Max, things just that I have, some knowledge on, but I'm not super well versed in. And he said to me at one point, like, I agree with you, Ben. I think we should be lifelong learners, but like, also it's okay to be confident in who you are. You don't have to, have this like imposter syndrome of, hey, I'm not good enough. And so I definitely encourage a young coach to surround themselves with great mentors, great leaders, and have this hunger, but also just to live as if, to continue to be willing to go out and test stuff. Because the greatest mentors and coaches around you have gotten to where they've gotten not because they haven't failed, but because they failed, a million times. And Edison, I think, said it best, and he was like, yeah, I didn't find, another way of failure. I just found another way, or I didn't fail. I'm getting this wrong, but I didn't, he was talking about failure. Essentially, he found another way that didn't work in his process to finding the way that helped him made the light bulb work, right? So, or Jordan saying that, you miss 100, or was it Gretzky or Jordan saying you miss 100% of the opportunities you don't take.
Yeah.
So take the shots, and yeah, you might get some critique. You might have some people that really come at you, but you can't stop someone from having an opinion. If you do the best job in the world, someone's probably still going to have an opinion. If you do the worst job in the world and really make a mistake, someone's probably still going to have an opinion. But the worst thing I think you can do is to never step foot in the arena. And if we're expecting the athletes to step foot in the arena daily, then we should be willing to go toe to toe with them and stand next to them. The Roman system. I'm kind of a nerd, so forgive me for this. Their shield system of why their infantry and their system work is all the shields are interlocked to overlap the shoulder of the soldier next to them. And so the kind of trust that fosters in someone to say, hey, I believe that you're not going to break the link in this, chain, and you've got my back. It speaks volumes. So when you go out there and you're like, hey, I may not have all the answers. I'm going to try this. And, I appreciate you for trusting me on this. And if we mess this up, then we're going to own it. Like, I'll own it, or we'll own it together, and we'll adjust. I mean, that's really powerful. And actually, Pat Boyle, who's a recruiting coordinator and assistant coach at Towson, just called me yesterday and was telling me how he just had that conversation with one of his distance guys. And I love Pat. I've known him for a couple of years now and seen how much he's grown from being an athlete to now a coach. And he's in this journey, and he's just willing to experiment. And he said to him, yeah, I'm willing to experiment. It would make no sense for me to adjust your plan 2 weeks before, mid-season. So let's roll with it. I really do believe that it works. And when a swimmer hears that, I think they feed off that energy and that confidence as well.
Yeah. Totally. Oh man, I love it. So much good stuff in there.
Sweet.
Ben, thanks for hopping on. Thanks for taking the time to talk to Zhao and I. I know it's a little hard with Zhao here. Normally it would just be a good conversation between us two, but but no. It's been awesome. I feel like I'm going to keep you as a contact 100% moving forward. I've really enjoyed learning from you and talking to you, and yeah, man, if there's anything else you'd like to add, now's the time.
Where can we find RaceBetter?
Yeah,
you can find RaceBetter on Instagram at RaceBetter. We're on YouTube at RaceBetter Official. Right now, our YouTube mostly just has our dryland and strength videos and demonstrations, ever-growing library, but we do plan on incorporating, other things, underwater swim technique, above water stop, and more of that talking point, that connection. We'll probably have guest speakers and industry experts speaking on a wide range of topics, from nutrition to recruiting to physical therapy and that sort of thing, on how to do prehab, post-hab for the shoulders. And then our website is racebetter.org. So if you're looking to come and schedule a consult with a coach for any sort of topic, or if you're a coach looking for strength conditioning programming for your team, this is a great time to start having those conversations now, because we customize everything. Like, you're not going to get it off the shelf, cut and paste, copy paste program. We want to work with you, understand how we can work alongside you, not against you, not to cut you out, but to work alongside you to fit into your season plan. When you need them to be a little bit swamped, we want to work with you to target a certain energy system. We need them to be a little bit lighter and faster before paper and before big meet. We want to work with you to align those things and just teach movement literacy. So even if you're thinking, hey, like, I already have a setup, I'm confident with it, or I have a setup, maybe I'm not happy with it, but I got to ride it out until the end of the season, that's fine. But it doesn't hurt to have the conversation now, so we can plan for the summer, for the fall, and start doing that. So again, RaceBetter or racebetter.org is
nice.
the way to find us. So.
Awesome.
But Seamus, one thing I'd love to use, the listeners to hear from you is, we had a great conversation offline about why you're doing this. Maybe you've already covered it. Admittedly, I've only listened to a handful of your podcasts leading up to this call. I just got introduced to it through Joe, but hearing your story about why you love telling stories and what that means in the swimming community, and just everything we've talked about here relationally. Can you speak a little bit to what your bigger vision is for the Get Out Swim, and how you see that uniting folks to change and elevate the swimming community?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I appreciate you saying that, and I would say that the whole genesis of this was I've been a lifelong swimmer. I've been around swimming my whole life, and I was a swim nerd. I was someone who was always invested in the backstories of Olympians and coaches, and I studied sport journalism in college, and I saw an outlet for a sport like swimming to have more stories being told. And I've taken an approach that is certainly more coaching, leadership oriented, because that's also part of my pursuit, is wanting to now coach at the highest level I can and learn from people like yourself, from Zhao, from other great people and coaches out there. So that's kind of been the whole reason why I started this podcast, and it's been cool to see because I feel like it's grown organically. And again, with a sport like swimming, there's always a need for more stories and people just connecting with each other, and I think sharing that. So it's nice because I'll go to a local club meet and I'll have someone come up to me on the pool deck and say, "Hey, I loved your last podcast," or it was really inspiring what you said. And for me, it takes me aback because I don't expect people to even come up to me and say that or whatnot. But I think just hearing that helps me understand and know that there are people who find it helpful to have other coaches share their experiences and their knowledge. So that's what keeps me going. And I just want to keep telling stories, and I feel like that's also it's kind of a calling in a way. I mean, I'm not someone who's super spiritual, but I would say that it does feel like a calling of sorts too, because I know that I'm good at asking questions and I'm curious, and so just kind of continuing to lean into that, but also surrounding yourself with people who are also like-minded, like Zhao. Zhao's definitely been someone who's helped generate new ideas, because when you're doing something on your own too, I'm sure you can relate, or you guys can both relate. Like when you're trying to build something on your own, you might have good ideas and what you're good at, but also it helps having other people to fill in those gaps or to give you a different perspective. So again, even connecting with someone like Zhao has been helpful. And yeah.
Man, you touched on so many good points there. Like the word calling, and then also sort of the ideas in a vacuum, right? Because I do think coaching is a calling. When we look at a weekend, we don't want it to be transactional. We're not chasing numbers. If someone comes to a lab or clinic experience, like, yeah, we got to fill numbers to pay, folks to come in, to rent a venue, do all that stuff. But I think I'm a big believer that if you build it, they will come, right? If you build a great product, then word will spread. And if coaching is a calling, then like, what are you hoping to impart? But it does get lonely building inside a vacuum. And I think of one of my investors, or not investors, my investor friends who mentored me when I was in my second startup. And we were sitting at a pizza shop one day, and he said to me, this is when we first kind of got big enough where we kind of painted a target, I guess, on our own backs with Uber, who was the big kind of heavyweight in the space at the time. And he said to me, how do you go about this in a way where you can write a press release that is intimidating enough to kind of like put your competitors kind of like on notice, keep them on their toes, but not drink so much of your own Kool-Aid that you forget to innovate and continue to grow? How do you listen to your customers to adapt, recognizing that you don't know everything, but also simultaneously recognize that your customers may not always know what they truly want or what they need is best for them. And not do it from a place of like, arrogance, but just from a place of curiosity. And then how do you live and operate, conduct yourselves and operate the company with integrity to your staff, and also to yourself in a way that you can go back home and put your head down the pillow every day and say, hey, I've done everything I can to the best of my ability. And it's like little nuggets like that just, stuck with me. There's been, I would say, probably half a dozen, maybe a dozen moments, over the last 15 years of my life, like that, that really have shaped kind of where we're at today. And so being able to have someone like Zhao, someone like you, even just in this conversation, what I've gleaned from this, and having other people in the space over the years. Rocket, who's a great coach and athlete who, I got to be with him when he was in kind of the latter years of his coaching, but also getting into painting and seeing how that impacted his recharge time. all those things shape us, and it keeps us humble. It makes sure that we don't drink so much of our own Kool-Aid that we're kind of just pushing our agenda. Because I think that's part of what being a leader is. You have to almost be creative enough to be a visionary to do something new, and that requires a kind of vulnerability. But you can sometimes become so tunnel visioned and focused that you actually miss some key things where having an outside voice actually doesn't hurt your vision, but then it accelerates and it takes you on this like it puts rocket fuel on it, right? And takes you on this S curve. Not to get too philosophical, but yeah, that's sort of how I think about that.
Absolutely.
And that's why we love the Olympics, I think, because, you know, when you talk about storytelling and your sports journalism background, like people gravitate towards it because you get all the backstories. Like, I'm not sure that we need the boxing UFC level sort of like, there's always a villain, a hero, you know, very combative approach. But at the same time, like, I think there's something about us always being very kind of PC and polite in terms of how we are with each of our competitors that, like, we're our own worst enemies sometimes. Like, you know, Joe, we've talked about this where, you know, whether you win, lose in a football game, you're expected to show up as an athlete and coach to a presser at the end, right? And you got to deal with the media who can be, most often can be brutal, right?
Relentless.
But you recognize that, hey, that's what I got to do because the fans, the media, like all, that's what makes the circus go round, right? And so, are we willing to maybe it's not tackled the same way, but are we willing to engage in discussions like this in the world? Are we willing to pursue other channels to help ourselves grow the sport? And I think that's why I love people like Iago and Chico over at GW. You know, I guess they just rattled off some of the best Brazilians in the game right now because I truly have a lot of respect for them because they're willing to step outside the box and do something different. They, like those two guys, just set up the whole dual meet tournament this fall between a bunch of different colleges, and they're trying to think outside the mold. And I think there's room in the sport for the NCAA model to coexist with something new, something that creates more fan engagement. You know, and I don't want to tip off like, you know, all the amazing discussions we've been having behind the scenes about how Iago and how we're trying to like grow this thing into next year. But let's just say, like, I think people in the swim community are going to be in for a real treat because we've got some stuff up our sleeves that not just like a gimmicky sort of way, but we've really tried to take a step back, you know, recognize that we don't have to be the smartest people in the room, but surround ourselves with some really bright folks who care and love the sport and love people, and say, hey, what can we do to engage the community better in a way that creates lasting loyalty, lasting camaraderie and followers.
Absolutely.
Sweet.
Yeah, love it. Ben, thanks again. Appreciate your time, and Zhao, thanks for hopping on and being a great co-host. And yeah, guys, we'll stay in touch, and then thanks again.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Totally.
Sweet.